sure that's chapter 13. Hey. Karen, why don't you go out on the porch? Hey, Care Bear, where's your rope? Where's that rope? Where's that rope? All right, Karen, I'm beginning. You can't talk to me. Okay, everybody, today we're talking about chapter 13. This is about externalities and public goods. This is the last new material we will do. For the next 2 days, I'll be going over review for the final, and I'll be uploading a study sheet for the final today. It will be similar to the study sheet I made for your second exam and your third exam, which had everything you needed to know on them. The review I made for your first exam had questions for you to fill out that we then went over in class. But I'm just going to make you a study sheet that you can reference, and so you know what you need to know for the final. The final is comprehensive, but I don't want you to worry about it. I want you to leave this class liking economics and knowing what it's about, so it's not going to be very intense. That being said, please try. And your final is, let's see, so last day of class is this Friday, the 1st, so that's going to be when your extra credit is due, and your extra credit is a book report on 3 chapters of The Invisible Hook by Pete Leeson. You should be able to find a PDF of this book online, and you also should know how to write a book report. If you read this book and you want to explain 3 chapters to your friends, and you want to talk about how Pete Leeson connects piracy and the action of pirates to economic concepts, what would you say? It's that simple. You've got this. I believe in you. Final exam is May 9th. That's a Saturday, and that's going to be open from 6 until 10 p.m. The university set that time, so there's nothing I can do about it. Okay, so chapter 13 is the last new material we're going to go over. This is on externalities and public goods. And in this chapter, we're talking about how the consumption or production of goods will often have spillover effects that will affect the utility of individuals not involved directly in the transaction. So these are things like if your neighbor plants a beautiful flower garden, you didn't pay for any of the flowers or the labor and time that your neighbor put into that, but it looks nice and it raises the value of your own home, which is near your neighbor's nice-looking house. On the flip side, we have negative externalities, which could be something like the guy next to you in class wearing too much cologne. You didn't pay for that cologne, you didn't sell him that cologne, but you wish he didn't buy it. There's a spillover effect of that transaction in which you were not even involved that is negatively affecting you. So those are externalities. We're going to go into those more, obviously. And then we're going to talk about different kinds of goods. We're going to talk about public goods, and I think you'll be interested in the economic definition of public goods because it's different than what you're thinking of, probably. And we're going to talk about how it's difficult to get humans to act together in such a way that efficiently utilizes public goods and distributes welfare and utility in an efficient way. Okay, so the definition of public goods is that they are non-excludable and non-rival. I know what you're thinking. What does that mean? A good is excludable if I can keep you from consuming it. I can keep you from drinking my milkshake. A good is rival if you and another person cannot consume the good at the same time. So far we've basically been talking about private goods, which are goods that are rival and excludable, like a cup of coffee. If a good is rival, and excludable, then I can keep you from consuming the good. I can move my cup of coffee. I can hold it in my hand. I can drink it in another room. There's a million ways I can keep you from drinking my cup of coffee. And I cannot drink a whole cup of coffee and then you drink that whole cup of coffee. We cannot both consume the whole cup of coffee. Another example of this, ice cream cone, basically any good you can think of that we've been talking about this whole time, other than our financial markets and our labor markets. Basically, any physical good, any good that you can drop on your foot is going to be a private good, which is rival and excludable. And then we have on the opposite spectrum, if a good is non-rival, a non-rival and non-excludable. So I cannot keep you from consuming it, and many people can consume the good at the same time. That is a public good. A really good example of this, I think, is a fireworks show. I cannot keep people miles away from seeing the fireworks I'm setting off, and infinite people are able to consume the good of the fireworks show. National defense is another really good one. It's really hard to say that we will provide national defense for everybody except for Dave. That's very difficult. And that's another example of a public good. And then we have these goods on the diagonal here that are a little less cut and dry. We can have a good that is non-rival, which means that you and another person can consume the good at the same time. But it's also excludable, which means I can keep an individual from consuming it. An example of this is a private pool. We can fit many people in the pool. If I'm in the pool, you are also able to be in the pool and consume the good of the pool. If I'm on the golf course, you can also be on the golf course. But I can keep you from entering both of these establishments. I can require an ID check. You can be required to be a member of the country club where the golf course or the pool are located. So you can see why we call these club goods, because many people are able to enjoy them at once, but we're able to keep individuals from enjoying them if we so choose. And then in this last spot down here, we have goods that are rival. You and another person cannot consume them at the same time, but they're also non-excludable, meaning I cannot keep you from consuming it. Examples of these are a little harder to come by. We call them common goods. A good example, I think, is a free parking spot. You and another car cannot be parked in the same parking spot at the same time. However, I cannot keep you from parking in that parking spot. It is non-excludable. I'm unable to keep you from using the free parking spot, but it's also rival. If you're in it, then I can't use it. Public highway is another example of this, but the connection is a little more tenuous. I'm unable to keep you from using a public highway, but public highways can also be rivalrous. There's a point at which we will have so many people consuming the highway that we get traffic. Okay. So we call these four goods, if they're excludable and rival, like a cup of coffee, that's a private good. This is a good you can drop on your foot. If they are excludable and non-rival, we call that a club good. Non-excludable and rival is a common good, like the free parking spot or the public highway. And then what we're going to be focusing on in this chapter are the public goods, like fireworks shows and national defense. Okay, so let's do an example here. Remembering that excludability is a feature of a good that means you can keep someone from consuming it, and rivalry is a feature of a good, meaning that if one person is consuming it, another person cannot also consume the good. So which of the following is the best example of a public good? We have an iPod, a bottle of soda, we have a bottle of soda, we have clean air, an economics lecture, and a highway. So let's go through these one by one. An iPod, I think that's an example of a private good. I can keep you from using my iPod. Same with a bottle of soda. I can keep you from drinking my soda, and if I drink the soda, you then cannot also drink the soda. Clean air. Am I able to keep you from consuming clean air? No. I don't have control over where air goes or who breathes it. And is it rival? Can you and another person consume clean air at the same time? Absolutely. So far, clean air is our leading contestant for the correct answer. An economics lecture. Now let's assume that we are still giving lectures on campus. We're not dealing with any of this COVID nonsense. How would we classify an economics lecture? Well, it's not rival, right? As 250 of you know, you and another person can consume an economics lecture at the same time. Is it excludable? Can I keep you from consuming an economics lecture? Well, I can't really keep you from consuming this one, but if we were still at WVU in a classroom, I could require your student ID for you to enter the room, or I would, just like we check your IDs when you turn in your exams. So an economics lecture, I think, would be an example of a club good. So let's write these down, actually. Economics lecture is a club good. The caps lock is on, but we're just going to go for it. An iPod, I think, is a private good. Bottle of soda, same thing, private good. Clean air, that's our leading contender right now for a public good. Oops. My grandmother's going to be watching this lecture, so I'm on my best behavior, but Karen is not. Okay, how about a highway? We talked about this in the last slide. Can I keep you from consuming a public highway? We're assuming we don't have any easy pass or tolls, or it's not an HOV lane or anything like that. Can I keep you from consuming it? No, non-excludable. But we talked about the rivalry of a highway. If enough people are consuming it, we're going to end up getting traffic. So that's arguable. You can think about it in your own personal economist brain, but I'm going to call a highway a common good, which if you go back to the slide before this, and I will upload these slides, you'll see that a public highway, we've decided, great economists before us have decided that a public highway is non-excludable and it's also rival, making it a common good. So I'm going to say that clean air is the best example here of a public good. Okay. So if a good is non-excludable, meaning that I cannot keep you from consuming it, that good is going to have a feature that we call positive externality. An externality is an effect that a good has on someone who was not involved in the transaction of that good. I didn't sell that good, I didn't buy that good, but I'm being affected by the fact that that good is being bought or sold. Externalities can be positive or negative. A positive externality, this is the example that we used of your neighbor planting a beautiful flower garden. A positive externality is a beneficial effect on someone not involved in the transaction. And a negative externality, like the guy sitting next to you wearing too much cologne, this is a detrimental effect on someone not involved in the transaction. You didn't buy the cologne, you didn't sell the cologne, but you're being hurt by the fact that that cologne was bought and sold. It is a law of economics that positive externalities are always underproduced and negative externalities are always overproduced. This is a sad reality that we're going to have to deal with, and we're going to explore some options for minimizing the underproduction of positive externalities and the overproduction of negative externalities. Why are positive externalities always underproduced? Well, we have a free rider problem. People who benefit from a good they do not have to pay for are always going to want more and more of it. We always want more and more of the group projects we are in to involve that one person who's going to do all the work. If I don't have to pay for a fireworks show and I like fireworks, I would like fireworks every day. This goes back to the question I asked Houston on the very first day of class: how many hamburgers do you want? If that's the only information I'm giving you, the answer is infinity. If you don't have to pay for it, you want infinity of it. We cannot produce infinity of a thing, therefore, a positive externality is always underproduced. That's the philosophical reason. The realistic economic reason is that the producer of a positive externality is not compensated for these positive spillovers. What does this mean? Your neighbor who plants a beautiful flower garden that you benefit from, so your housing value increases. When you move and sell your house for a higher price than you would have if the neighbor did not plant that flower garden, you're not going to give some of the money to that neighbor who helped you sell your house for a higher price. The producer is not compensated for these positive spillovers because the people affected by the positive spillovers, by definition, are not involved in the transaction whatsoever. On the flip side, a negative externality is always overproduced. Why is this? Well, if something is free and I don't like it, I would like zero of it. Maybe if you were paying me to sit next to the kid who wears too much cologne, then maybe we could internalize some of the effects of this negative externality. We want zero of a free bad thing. If I had asked Houston on the first day of class, not how many hamburgers do you want, but how many punches in the face would you like, and that was the only information I gave him, his answer would be zero. But if I said, how many punches in the face would you like, and I'll pay you $1,000 for each one, now we have an interesting economic question. But if it's a free thing and it's bad, we want zero of it. That's a law of economics. A more realistic reason that negative externalities are always overproduced is that the producer is not punished for negative spillovers. I'm not able to fine the kid sitting next to you who's wearing too much cologne. I'm not able to, in many cases, fine the factory downriver that's polluting my stream. So we're going to talk about ways that we can try to get more positive externalities and experience fewer negative externalities. One good that has positive externalities is new technology. This is a quote from your book, which I highly recommend you read. Again, the link to it is in the syllabus. It is free and online. New technology often has positive externalities. That is, there are often spillovers from the invention of new technology that benefits firms other than the innovator. The social benefit of an invention, once the firm accounts for these spillovers, typically exceeds the private benefit to the inventor. If inventors could receive a greater share of the broader social benefits for their work, they would have a greater incentive to seek out new inventions. So how can we encourage producers to make more goods with positive externalities, like technology, given that the producer is not fully compensated for the breadth and scope of the positive impact of their work? And how can we encourage producers to make fewer goods with negative externalities like pollution, given that the producer is often not punished for this production of negative spillovers? A few examples of solutions here. A few examples of solutions here, and if you decide to get a job in the policy sector after this, and you move to DC and you're working on questions such as how can we get more startups to come into town? How can we get more people to throw their trash in the trash can? How can we get fewer companies to pollute the air. And then you might come up with some of these solutions. You could provide subsidies for positive externalities, or you could tax the production of negative externalities. A subsidy is just the opposite of a tax. This is when the government will pay some amount to a firm or an individual for the production of something. So I'm just going to write here the opposite of a tax because we all know what a tax is. And then perhaps also, depending on the level of pollution that a firm produces, we could levy a pollution tax on the firm. So now that we have attached a monetary value to the pollution based on the negative health effects that the pollution has on people living in surrounding areas, based on the negative impacts to the environment, you can get a job as an economist where you will have projects in which your job is to come up with this number, right? What is the appropriate tax to levy on a company given that their pollution kills 60 fish a week in the local streams? These are all kinds of jobs you can get. You can get my job too, if you want. Okay, so a tax is a punitive measure designed to minimize negative externalities. Externalities, that's not how that's spelled. Okay, so we can subsidize positive externalities. We can give producers incentives to create new technology that will then be distributed amongst the public very quickly and used to then produce more and more positive things for which the original inventor will not be compensated. And we can tax negative externalities. We can implement a punishment on producers who are negatively affecting people other than their direct consumers. Okay. We have another vocabulary term here, the tragedy of the commons. This is a direct quote from, oh, actually give me 1 second because I have forgotten who came up with the tragedy of the commons. I'm going to guess it's Adam Smith. What do you guys guess? You guess it was me? I didn't come up with that, but that's very nice of you to say that. Tragedy of the commons. Inventor? Garrett Hardin. Who is that guy? Well, good job, Garrett. He came up with the tragedy of the commons. We'll give him credit. Ironically, we have some positive externalities from Mr. Garrett Hardin. Okay, so here's a quote from apparently Garrett Hardin's paper on the tragedy of the commons, in which he defines this term. What is common to many is least taken care of, for all people have greater regard for what is their own than for what they possess in common with others. When I was an undergrad, my economics professor, who went to WVU as well, asked us if, in the case where we had someone coming over to our house that we shared with many roommates, if we would take more care to clean the common areas or to clean our own personal area, to clean our bedroom or to clean the living room. And I think it makes sense that you would see that you would want to clean your bedroom instead of the living room if you had someone coming over. Having a clean bedroom reflects positively on you, because the person who is over knows that it is your bedroom and you are the one responsible for how it looks. Whereas if you clean the common room, it might be the case that the person who comes over assumes that someone else who lived there cleaned it. Additionally, Garrett Hardin would argue that cleaning the common room is a futile task. It's always going to be dirtier than your own bedroom because it is an area that you share in common with others, so there is less incentive for everyone to work together to keep it clean. Here's an example. The Ogallala Aquifer is a large underground pool of fresh water under several western states in the U.S. Any farmer with land above the aquifer can pump water out of it. Which of the following statements about the aquifer is correct? 1. The aquifer is an artificially scarce good, which should be left as it is. That doesn't really make any sense. I'm going to cross that one out, so just generally not making sense. The aquifer is a private good, which must be privately owned to use efficiently. This is interesting. It makes sense that if we make certain public goods privately owned, they will be used more efficiently, because then we have individuals we can point to who are responsible for that private good, which used to be a public good. And additionally, those owners have an incentive to take care of that now private good. But let's go back to our chart and see if it's true that the aquifer really is a private good. Let's see, a private good is rival and excludable, like a cup of coffee or an ice cream cone, a good you can hold in your hand and drop on your foot. Is the aquifer a private good? No. It says right here that any farmer with land above the aquifer can pump water out of it. That means that the aquifer is non-rival. More than one person can use it at once. So for that reason, we're going to cross this one out, because the aquifer is not a private good. It is either a public good, a club good, or a common good. Those are our other three kinds of goods we can have. Okay, C, the aquifer is a public good which must be publicly owned to be used efficiently. Okay, so just the opposite of Part B here. Part B, the part that made option B incorrect was that the aquifer was defined as a private good. That's not true. Now, the aquifer could be a public good, so this part of answer C is correct. However, it's the second part that's going to get us here. The whole issue is that to use a good efficiently, they cannot be publicly owned. So this one's going to be incorrect as well, because it should never, an economist should never come up with the answer that a good will be used more efficiently if we make it public. If we allow anyone to use it, and if as many people are able to use it at once as they want, that's never going to end up with efficient use of the good. Okay, so that leaves us with answer D. The aquifer is a common property resource, so a common good, which will be overused if no one owns it. Absolutely. If none of these farmers in particular own the aquifer, but they're all able to pump water out of it whenever they want, then the aquifer will be overused. A possible solution to the tragedy of the commons, thank you, Garrett Hardin, is to assign property rights of the good. We could pick a farmer, any farmer with land above the Ogallala aquifer, and say, you now own the aquifer. A reasonable outcome of this assignment of property rights is that the farmer will then go to all his farmer friends and say, I will allow you to pump X amount of water from the aquifer for a certain amount of money. So now we're assigning property rights to the aquifer, and we're also assigning a monetary value to use of the aquifer. Without this assignment of monetary value to a good, we're dealing essentially only with a demand curve. And remember, we talked about if consumers are in charge, if the only people in the market are those who are demanding things, well, then we would like infinity things, and we would like them to cost $0. However, there's a second player in the market, our co-star, the supply curve. Now, if only producers are in charge in the world, producers would like to produce nothing, and they would like to charge you infinity dollars for it. So we have this tension, the two curves come together, and at equilibrium, we are assigning a price to something, and we are producing a certain amount of that thing. So we have to have this combination of production and consumption, of wanting something and owning something, that results in an efficient market of buying and selling, and a market in which those who buy are also those who benefit, and those who sell are the ones who get the money for selling the thing. Okay, so the aquifer is a common good which will be overused if no one owns it. Okay. I'm sure you can think of plenty of examples of the tragedy of the commons. I haven't been to the dining hall. I honestly don't even know where it is. But without even stepping foot in there, I can guess that there's a cereal station and that it is a mess. Go ahead and make that connection in your own personal economist brain. Okay, here's another example that has to do with the tragedy of the commons and public goods. This one's going to blow your mind, I think. Why has the value of ivory threatened the extinction of the elephant, but the value of beef has enhanced the survival of the cow? If we allegedly care so much about the ivory trade and the ethics involved in it and the fact that elephants are an endangered species, why are we still facing these issues? Why aren't cows an endangered species? We have some options here. Option A, elephants are larger than cows, requiring more economic resources. That doesn't make any sense. Cows are a common resource, whereas elephants are owned by the government. I do not think it's true that elephants are owned by the government. And I also don't think it's true that cows are a common resource. Let's go back to our definition of what a common good is. A common good is rival. So me and another person cannot consume a cow at the same time. Assuming we consume the whole cow, I'm going to say that's true. But a common good is also non-excludable, meaning that you cannot keep me from consuming a cow. That's not true. Cows are private goods, and a farmer is easily able to keep me from consuming a cow. I don't have the right to just walk up to a cow and have it. Option C, elephants live in Africa where economic resources are scarce. Again, this option makes no sense, so we're just going to cross that off. Here's our correct answer. Elephants are a common resource. Because elephants are protected by the government and no individual is allowed to own them, we then have this incentive for people to overuse the elephant population without being punished for their use of it. Whereas cows are privately owned. If you want to use a cow for something, you either need to go buy a cow and pay for it, or you already own that cow, and to use it for beef, you then lose the cow. So there's a cost involved with the production of beef, but not the production of ivory. If you are a poacher and you go out and kill an elephant and get the ivory and sell it, assuming that it was free for you to go find the elephant and kill the elephant and sell the ivory and all of this, you have essentially made money off that elephant without suffering any costs whatsoever. Elephants are a common resource, whereas cows are privately owned. So here we have a tragedy of the commons situation applied to a common resource such as elephants, and we can see that we do not have a tragedy of the commons issue with cows, which are private goods. There's a famous solution to the issue of externalities. It's called the Coase theorem. Coase assumes zero transaction costs, so just like on the last slide when we assumed that a poacher can go find an elephant for free, can kill the elephant, and then can immediately find a buyer for the ivory. Assuming zero transaction costs, we can assign property rights to the production of externalities, and we can arrive at an efficient solution to the underproduction of positive externalities or the overproduction of negative externalities. So when we say an efficient solution, what we mean is that this idea of underproduction or overproduction will no longer exist. We'll be producing exactly the right amount of positive and negative externalities. Now I know what you're thinking. Erica, you just said that it's a law of economics that positive externalities are overproduced and positive externalities are underproduced and negative externalities are overproduced. So how could it be the case that we have an efficiently produced positive externality? Good question. We actually are going to transform the externality and internalize the cost or benefit to the transaction that's occurring. Here's an example. Dick owns a dog whose nighttime barking annoys his neighbor Jane. Suppose that the benefit of keeping that dog outside at night is worth $500 to Dick, and that Jane bears a cost of the dog barking at night, and let's assign a monetary value to that. Let's say that that cost to Jane is $700, maybe in lost sleep, maybe she's late to work, maybe she loses her job because she was up late because the dog was barking, who knows. But we've assigned these values. Dick likes to have the dog outside at night, maybe because he also likes to sleep and he knows that the dog barks. And the value to Dick of having that dog outside is $500. However, Jane, who doesn't own the dog, is bearing this cost of $700. Coase would say that a possible private solution to this problem is that Jane pays Dick $650 to keep the dog inside at night. This is a pretty genius solution. Let's talk about this a little bit more. So Dick values, let's talk about, let's call this good just the dog. We're going to refer to the dog as the good. So to Dick, Dick values the dog at $500. That's how much the dog is worth to Dick. So even if Jane paid Dick $501 to keep the dog inside, economics tells us that Dick should take that deal. Okay, so Dick values the dog at $500. Jane doesn't like the dog, so Jane, let's say the dog costs Jane $700. So there's got to be some number. There's got to be a number in between 500 and 700, right? As long as Jane is paying Dick more than $500, Dick will agree to keep the dog inside. But how much more than $500 is Jane willing to pay? Well, anything up to $699, right? Anything that decreases the cost she bears from the barking at all. So the solution here is that Jane should pay Dick a subsidy. We're now, instead of taxing Dick for the negative externality, we are paying him to shift his behavior so that the negative externality no longer exists. Instead of taxing Dick so that he produces less of the negative externality, we are paying him so that he acts in such a way that the negative externality no longer exists. Okay, so a solution here, Coase would say that Jane should pay Dick a subsidy greater than his valuation of the dog, greater than the amount that Dick values the dog, but less than her own cost of the dog. Therefore, any amount greater than $500 but less than $700 is an effective subsidy. So we have a negative externality here, which is the barking of the dog. But using the Coase theorem, we have discovered a physical piece of property that belongs to someone, which we can then attack instead of the negative externality itself, right? The barking is the issue, but it's the dog causing the barking, and Dick owns the dog. And then we can go from there. And again, we're assuming zero transaction costs here. We're assuming that Jane knows exactly how much that dog is worth to Dick. We're assuming that Jane knows exactly what her cost is from that dog barking. And we're assuming that the two of them can come to a solution instantaneously. Obviously, these are pretty simplifying assumptions, but the Coase theorem is a great jumping off point to consider solutions to the overproduction of negative externalities and the underproduction of positive externalities. Okay, this is the last new material we're going to be going over. Again, this is chapter 13 in your book. I encourage you to read through that chapter yourself, especially if you are interested in entering the policy sector after graduation. I will be uploading a review for your final exam, and then for the next 2 days, the last 2 days of this class ever, we will be going over that review.